So in this tutorial, we're going to focus on HTML, and this is briefly what we're going to go through in this video. So I'm going to quickly go through the different type of editors which you can use to write your HTML code. Then we're going to go through layout, so how web pages, the modern web pages are built nowadays, and then we will move into the meaningful content. So we're going to go through all the tags, through all the different elements, HTML elements, and we're going to see how to use them. We're going to talk a little bit more about attributes, text formatting, and a few other aspects which are useful for basically for web development. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so very first point on our list is a text editor. So technically you could work on even in Notepad. If you're working on Windows, then you could use Notepad technically. That will also work. If you're using Mac, then you could use Notes app or any other editor. Basically HTML files are just text files, but sooner or later you're gonna realize that using Notepad isn't that handy, and that's why a lot of different editors were created. As you can see, let's have a look at the sample here. So you're gonna see the difference at glance. So let's compare the same file here and here. So you already see that if you have dedicated editor, you're gonna have colored syntax, so it's much easier to read this than that. Then if you a lot of editors have some plugins which makes it easier. So as you can see, they are formatting this on our behalf. So if we do something like this or that, it will auto format our code, so it will always look good, while here obviously nothing like this is happening, so we have to do everything by ourselves. So long story short, using Notepad isn't the best idea to start your journey with HTML. What you can do then, what you can use then, there are plenty of editors that changes actually. You know, a few years back when I start programming, front-end programming, one of the most common was Notepad++, but as for today, I strongly suggest you to use Visual Studio Code, but this is just, you know, one of the preference. If you search for top HTML editors, you're probably gonna find a list of the ones which are at this very moment one of the top. I used to use Atom before. It's also very nice. Then there's Notepad++, which I told you before. Sublime, I've been using this for the very long time. It's a very nice editor, and there are some more. And as for today, I got used to using Visual Studio Code because it supports also, it has a lot of plugins which you can use, you can install. It supports command line over here. We're gonna learn about command line in other videos, and there are really a lot of stuff it can do. And on the other hand, it's quite minimalistic, so it doesn't, it's not that heavy, it's working fine. It allows you to work with the huge files. So my recommendation would be to go with Visual Studio Code and Studio Code. So just search for it and download the newest version. At the time when you're watching this video, the newest version might be different. It might look a little bit different, but basically just get the latest version for the platform of your choice. And I'm gonna show you a few examples soon. So for example, if we're gonna learn about classes, this is not in this video, it's gonna be in the CSS video. So if you want to watch this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. As far as CSS is concerned, usually you do something like this. Div, we're gonna learn today about div. So this HTML element class equals to some class 1, some class 2. So you have to write it like this, and because Visual Studio Code has emmet built in, so you can just do something like this. You can do some class 1, some class 2, and press tab, and as you can see, you get exactly the same result. So it has a lot of this extension and features which are making our life easier. So to sum up, definitely use one of the editors for dedicated for HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and whichever it is, it's up to you. If you want to follow me and have less confusions of what's going on, you want to have the same colors and so on, then just go with the Visual Studio Code. Okay, so let's move to the next point, which is structure. So before we move to the structure of HTML, let's repeat one thing, something I already did, but I didn't describe what I'm doing. As you can see, I've just created this index.html file, and if we open this in the File Explorer, you're gonna see that this is this kind of file. This file, it's currently empty, and obviously if we double click this, it's gonna open in web browser, because this HTML and HTML files are linked to our web browser. I'm using Google Chrome. If you're using any other web browser like Safari or Internet Explorer, that also will work. It's gonna open it in your default web browser. So as you can see, in order to start typing our HTML, to start programming, creating our first project and website, we don't need a lot. It's just about text editor, and you have to create file. You can create it manually, so you can just click new, for example, text document, and call it like index2.html. Just make sure to remove .txt, and you're gonna get the same result. You can also do the same from Visual Studio Code. So here is the file browser on the left, and you can create and delete, rename, and so on from here. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get my window to the left side. I'm gonna close this Explorer, because we will be working only on this, mostly on the single file index.html, and I'm gonna get this window to the right side. Close unnecessary tabs, and now let's just say hello world. Here it's not a valid HTML yet, but I want to show you something. So then again, if we open this file in a browser, so again, find it here and double click, so we can see here, so this is our source code and this is our result. Now if we want to if we're gonna add something, some new paragraph over here, and save the file, I'm pressing Ctrl S right now. You can do file save. It's gonna, actually auto correction, move it to the new paragraph. I didn't want it, but let's leave it as it is. I just want to show you that this change isn't reflected automatically. What we have to do, we have to click on this reload, and now it's gonna reload this new content over here. Now if we're gonna do something like this, so this is very first tag, which we're gonna learn very soon. You see that nothing has really changed, but we don't see this P over here. But if we click with the right mouse button, and we're gonna click on view page source, then we're gonna see our entire HTML over here, so including this P paragraph tags. Okay, I'm gonna do a little trick here. If you're using Visual Studio Code, you can follow along. If you click this icon, extensions, and search for a live server, you're gonna find this extension over here, and you should see the install button over here. I have it installed already, so I see uninstall and disable. So once you install, you're gonna have it ready for use. And once you have this one, what you can do is you can right click and choose open with live server, and what it does, it opens a new tab over here. You can see the address is slightly different. Here we have C users, so the file path, and here we have 127.0.0.1, which is our IP of localhost. So now let me do one more thing. I'm gonna use short template here. Let's save it, and let's add again some paragraph 2. And now what is happening is whenever I save my file, so I'm clicking file save, this one is getting reload automatically. So look at that, I'm clicking save and this refresh automatically. Now why I added this entire stuff, it's because without this extension won't work for us. So if I'm gonna refresh it now and I'm gonna create paragraph 4 and save it, it won't work, and this is because this extension require to have this elements over here. And now we're gonna move into this because this is very basic layout of almost any HTML page. So now let's jump into that. Pardon my interruptions for a moment. I just wanted to let you know that besides this video, we also released a lot of different tutorials. Especially you should check our Bootstrap 5 crash course, which we released recently. If you want to watch this video, you're gonna find the link somewhere over here or in the description down below. This is a perfect tutorial for the people who haven't used Bootstrap 5 or Bootstrap at all in the past, as well as for those who've been using Bootstrap for some previous projects and would like to know what has changed. And believe me, a lot has changed in newest Bootstrap 5. This video and this tutorial obviously is completely free for everyone. It's available on the YouTube, and if you would like to support us to help us creating more tutorials and materials like this video and the Bootstrap 5 course, you should also try our MDB UI kit, which is available also for free as an open source. You're gonna find a link to this project down below, so give a try and I'm sure you're gonna love it. As you can see, we are starting with this Doctype HTML. So this is basically declaration which defines that this is document in an HTML5. Long story short, as I mentioned, HTML5, as you can expect, there were different versions of HTML in the past. So currently HTML5 is the newest one, and this is what we're gonna learn. This is what we're gonna use in this tutorial and also for coming years to build web pages. Now, talking about the next one, which you can see here, we can jump into explanation of the tags. So the HTML element is the root element of HTML page, and as you can see, we have this opening and closing tag over here. So talking about the nomenclature, we often use tags and elements interchangeably. What I mean is that technically the element, HTML element, is defined by a start tag, some content in between, and the end tag, like we can see it over here. Also, as you can see already here, some of the HTML elements, they have only opening tag. But as I mentioned before, usually developers, they tend to call it both tag and element, so that's it's not a big deal, it's not a big issue if we call it HTML tag, HTML element interchangeably. It's just okay, but technically this is the entire element, and these are opening and closing tag. As you can see, they are pretty much the same. The only difference is that here we have a slash at the very beginning. So we have HTML, then we have head. So this is element which contains meta information about the page. We have some more meta information here. So like name suggests, this is a place where we store information, meta information about the page. This is usually used by web browser. This is also used by search engines. So for example, Google, we can add some special tags for Google, which will consist of meta keywords, meta titles, meta description. So let's have a look at this example. If I'm gonna check source page, you're gonna see that we have these meta properties over here. So these are the meta information for Google. We can't see them here. We need to check the source code to see them. Next, title, obviously the title of the page. So this is something which we see over here on the tab. So we can call it whatever we want. Let's say HTML tutorial. Okay, what you already can see as well is that we can nest our tags. So we can nest one under the other. So as a result, we can the head is a part of HTML as well as body. So each page basically consists of HTML tag, which defines the beginning and the end. Then we have a head for metadata and body, which contains the actual content. So if we type something here, it's gonna be displayed in our browser. Now let's get back for a second to our roadmap, and as you can see, we're gonna go. We just covered this layout, HTML head body. We're gonna get back to the semantic HTML and layouts later. Now let's move to tags. So we're gonna start with block level and inline level elements, and I'm gonna explain you what does it mean on the example. Let's start with paragraph. As you can see, we can write content directly between our body elements, but for example, if we try to start something from the new line, first of all, my emmet won't allow me to do that, so this prettier basically automatically fix this, but even let's do it this way. I'm gonna save this file without fixing the syntax. So as you can see, we saved file like this, but when I refresh the page, it basically ignore my new line character. This is because we shouldn't write content like this. The very basic block element is called paragraph, and it uses p tag. So whatever we put here, paragraph 1 will be displayed pretty much the same as the previous content, but if we start another paragraph and we call it paragraph 2, you're gonna see that it will move to the new line. So this is definition of block elements. So the block elements, they always start from a new line. And on the other hand, if we use inline elements, which we're gonna learn a little bit later, but just to give you example, B, which stands for bold, it's making this text bold. Let me show you that in more visible way. It's not breaking, it's not starting with the new line. If we would try to do paragraph over here, which by the way is a wrong HTML, we shouldn't put paragraph inside paragraph, but just for the sake of this tutorial to show you, as you can see, this always starts from a new line. So we have our paragraphs, which are very basic and most common tag, I believe, or one of the most common tags. So yeah, let me just paste you an example so we can clearly see how does it work. Let's move to the next element, which we're gonna use, by the way, to show a difference between them, to somehow separate them. So the other one is horizontal line. So we have HR, and this is the line which we can see over here. So this is the horizontal line. As you can see, actually both you can write this like that, or with the enclosing. This extra slash at the very end kind of means that this is the element which has only opening tag. It doesn't have a closing tag. So prettier, the other extension I'm using is just fixing this syntax and adding this slash for the better readability. and also according to some new standards. Let's move to the next one. The next one is heading. So for heading, we can use elements from H1 to H6. So if we do H1, so this is heading 1. This is heading 2. And as you can see, the size is getting smaller and smaller, and if we use all of them, it will look like that. And now, since we know how to use heading, let me do something like this. So we're gonna call it block elements, and then we're gonna use H2 to say this is paragraph. This is H horizontal line, and these are headings. Okay, so I'm gonna use it from now on to somehow distinguish different section. Now, where do we use this one? This is important for a few reasons. One very important one is for SEO, so for search engine optimization. Basically, well, long story short, there is. This is much more complex, but long story short, when we create a website, Google treats it like a kind of article. So it's kind of assumed that the article should have a single title, which we and then we should use H1 for this one as the biggest one. So you can imagine some news. So this is the news title, and then you have some headings and subheadings as you are writing more content. So if you would be writing something, you would have some paragraphs and heading all together to create a content of the page, which is kind of an article. Let's move on. Since I showed you already that it's kind of difficult to make new line, as I'm gonna save it without fixing the syntax, because HTML kind of ignore all white spaces over here. So in order to do it, we can use line break tag, which looks like this, and this will create this is gonna break a line for us. This is not a good way to break a line. There are different ways. You can use CSS for that, but we're gonna learn about it more in the next tutorial, when we're gonna learn CSS in one video. But as for now, I just want to let you know that there is this line break tag. So let me just add this here, and let's move on to the next one. And the next one is content division. So this is one of the most commonly used tag in HTML. It's called div. So this is abbreviation from division, and obviously we can put some content here, some paragraphs, for example. Now, it's difficult to show it because div is a container. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use a little bit of CSS. So although it might be new to you, but don't worry, we're gonna learn about it in the next tutorial. But just for information, I'm adding now an attribute to my element, and we're going to learn about attributes in a second. And this attribute defines styles for our page. So I'm going to say something like width 300 pixels. So I want to shape it so you could clearly see how does it works, how does it go. So we have 300 pixels, and we're going to set background color to something like red. So now you can see our div. So this is our div. Now if we open settings and navigate to more tools and then go to developer tools, we can inspect this element over here and we're gonna see its source code. So this inspector tool allows us to inspect our HTML. It works in both directions. So as you can see, as I highlight different part of my page, HTML page, it also highlights the corresponding part in our page, and this also works the other way around. So if I highlight on a page, it will also highlight a code on the left side for me. So as you can see, we have a div over here, this one, but it doesn't have background, doesn't have border, so we can't see it. So that's why I added this one. To show you this a little bit better, I've prepared this small code before to save some time and not to type it and everything by hand. So what we can see here, as we have 3 divs, each of them has pretty much similar styles. We just change a little bit sizes and colors, and as you can see, we can put one div inside the others, and this is very common practice. That's what we do very often, and this one is outside. And why divs are so important is basically because we create a structure of our page using mostly divs. Let me show you this example. I'm gonna attach it, which I'm gonna attach to this source files for this lesson, so you can download it afterwards. So I'm gonna remove for a second whatever we have done here, and I'm gonna paste it. So what it does is basically, as you can see, this is pretty much small HTML page, which consists of some CSS styles to give some colors, and then we have a few divs here. So so we have this one, that one, and those. So as you can see, this is just a very simple example of how we can create a layout of our page, with use of divs, because that's how you do it. So we create one huge div around, like this one. Let's open console and let's inspect this code. So as you can see, this is the whole div, and then we have this nav bar, navigation bar on the top, this bar, tagline. Then we have another div which consists of 2 others, so the left one and the right one, and then the last one at the beginning. So let's make a break here, and let's get back to our roadmap, and let's cover now this semantic HTML and layouts. So before HTML5 was introduced, this was basically how we created websites. So we've been using div for almost everything. So right, as you can see clearly here, we use it for some navigation bar, for menu, for content, for some footer, and so on. So what HTML5 brings, it basically says that we shouldn't use this one because, as you can see, this is not very descriptive, right? So looking at the code, we don't really know what is it doing. Now, instead of using div in HTML5, we can use semantic elements, which behave pretty much the same as content division, but they have different names. So what we would use for this one, for example, we could use nav, and then we know it's navigation. Then for the menu on the left, we could use aside. So we would call it aside, and this is the one. Then for this one, we could probably use something like article or section. So although there is no very strict rules on how to use that, I hope you can feel what's the idea behind it, right? So if we replace it like this, nothing really changed in our page, but now this is much more readable, right? So we have nav, we have a site navigation, so something which is not that crucial. We know that this is a main section of our page. We could have more, and let's quickly move to this one. So we have things like header, we have navigation, then we have sections, we have articles, we can have aside for some aside informations, then we have footer, details, and summary. So these are some of the HTML5 tags, semantic tags, which been introduced recently with HTML5 to make our life as a programmers a little bit better. Now let's move to the layout. So as you can see, we can clearly create this layout using div and a little bit of CSS, but there are some other ways. We're not gonna learn about them now, but I just want to let you know that there are a few ways to maintain your layout. So we could use CSS frameworks, for example, and one of the most common CSS framework is Bootstrap. So this is a framework which changed a lot the way we are building our page. I want to show you why it becomes so famous. So basically, if you go to layout and check the grid system, you're gonna see that Bootstrap has prepared, created, predefined styles and classes, which allows you easily to build different layouts like this one. And furthermore, this is responsive, so this layout will behave differently on a different screen size. So you can imagine that on tablet you're gonna see this like that. So we have something like this, but if we shrink our size, it's gonna go something like this, so one below the other. And using framework CSS is one of the options to get your layout done. There are other ways, so you could use CSS flags. We're not gonna go into that in this video. We're gonna have a separate video for CSS flags, but here you can already see that this is also about the layout, and there is also CSS grid, which is another option just to create a different way of grids with use of CSS. So for your information, just keep in mind that there are many ways to create your layout. You can do it by yourself using this semantic tags and CSS, or you can use predefined solution like, for example, Bootstrap. And if you would like to learn more about this one, I strongly encourage you to go to our YouTube channel, so youtube.com mdbootstrap.com, and then you're gonna find tutorials on grid on Bootstrap itself. So you can learn Bootstrap for free and Bootstrap Grid, which allows you to build this this layout. Okay, let's move on. So now we're gonna move to another element, which is called a block quote. And why do we use block quote for? Well, let me just quickly copy paste example, so you're gonna see it clearly by yourself. And let me just add some dividers here. So as you can see, the block quote is the tag which is basically meant for quotation, and this allows us to provide this attribute which was also introduced in HTML5. The city attribute specifies an URL to a document that explains the quote or why the text was inserted. Yeah, so basically, if you are quoting something, it's a good practice to use this one. And obviously, with the pinch of CSS, we can look at even better. Although as you can see, there is space over here, right? And let's open this inspector. You're gonna see that this space, this margin over here, this space over here is added by browser, and this is because this is how the web browser natively parse this kind of element, and we can use CSS to override it and create another look, give it another look, which will look more like a quote itself. So add some italics and different fonts and whatsoever. Okay, now another element which is called pre-formatted element. So as I shown you before, if you use tags and write some content and try to have some white spaces maintained, and I'm gonna save the file without fixing the syntax, it's gonna be ignored anyway. If you want to preserve these white spaces, we can use something called pre, and once we save it, as you can see, it's gonna keep all the white spaces over here. So if I do something like this, it will all remain in exactly the same order with all the spaces. This is also important because when you're gonna learn more about, for example, JavaScript, and you would like to write something and you don't want this to be interpreted by browser, you can just use it pre, and this will show everything as we want it to look, exactly the same way as we write it here in the source code. Okay, another very important element is or are tables. So tables are very often used in HTML. So let's quickly create a table. So obviously we start with a table keyword, then we have a tr for a row. So we are defining rows. I'm gonna show you the example. So we have single row now, and then we're gonna create cells. The abbreviation is TD for the table data. It's a little bit odd. It's not TC, but yeah, it's a TD for table data. And let's say this is the row 1, column 1. Let's have 3 of them, and we're gonna have something like this. And now I'm gonna copy and paste another row and call it row number 2. And now you can see this is here. You can't clearly see this yet. So let me do one more thing. I'm gonna set border to 1. And now we don't do it like this anymore. I just did it for you so you could clearly see how our table looks like. Nowadays we use CSS to add this border, but again we're gonna learn about it in next tutorial, a CSS tutorial, when I'm gonna show you how to change border of the table using CSS. For now, let's leave it as it is, and we can do more advanced examples. I'm gonna paste the one which I prepared for you. So this one, and let me add some border here. And let's add some distance over here. So as you can see, this has headings. So this has this very first row with different cells. So it's not TD, it's TH for heading. So we can give our columns a nice names, and we can have the same for footer. So we could have some different footer or summary down below. Okay, so these are the most common block level elements. There are obviously more, but we're not gonna focus on them now. These are the most common, and I want you to remember this before we move on. And we could go with all the others, but just from my experience, we don't use them that often. So let's move now to inline elements. And let me quickly remind you what's the difference between block versus inline. So if we have paragraph inside another paragraph, we're gonna get this word from the new line because paragraph is a block level element. And if we do the same, but we're gonna use span, for example. So I'm gonna replace this one with span. Then, span. Now, as you can see, this remains inline. So the inline elements, they are not starting with the new line. So this is the main difference. Okay, let me get rid of this one, as this is not a valid HTML, and I don't want you to remember that. Okay, now let's move on to a little bit of typography. So let's have typography, because all the typographic tags are inline elements. So we can have something like this is bold, and then we have I for italic. Let me save it, show you. So this is bold, italic. Then we can have U for underline. We can have M for emphasized. What else we have? Let's say we have del for deleted. We can have also mark for marked, and that's the most common ones, and they are all inline elements. So as you can see, we can have different typography depending on what we want to do with our text. Now, another very, very important and very commonly used HTML element is obviously an image. So I've prepared a logo image here, some image, which we're gonna use right now. So if we want to add image onto our page, we're gonna use image tag, and this usually comes with at least two attributes. So the first one is the source, so we have to point where our logo is located, and the other one is alt, which stands for alternative. So this is text which will basically explain what this picture is showing. So this is like company logo, and this is important because if, for example, image doesn't work for some reason, so I just made mistake right now, and I write the name which doesn't exist, we can see that we're gonna have this company logo here. So this will explain what was supposed to be here, and the other even more important reason to do it is that this alternative text is going to be used for all readers, for people using internet with the sight issue. So people who can't see well, and they are helping themselves with this software which basically reads page for them. They're gonna have much more easier life if you're gonna use this alternative element, alternative attribute, and describe what is on the image. Now, as you can see, we have two attributes here. We're gonna talk about the attributes a little bit later, but you can already see that each element can have some attributes, and there are some core attributes which every element can have, and there are some specific attributes which are dedicated to different tags. So let's move now to another important and a very commonly used element, which is an anchor. So this is very important. This is used very often because anchor allows us to create a link to different page. And let's have a look at this. So we have this href, and I'm gonna say, let's say http google.com, and I'm gonna use a value here saying like get me to the Google. So that's gonna create us a text which gonna be a link, and once we click on it, it's gonna get us to the page we want. Now what is important here is that first of all, we don't have to necessarily link to the pages. We can link, for example, to files as well. So I'm gonna do it like this, but I'm gonna provide this logo PNG, which we used before here, and write something like download logo. As you can see, this is inline, so they're going next to each other. I'm gonna add BR for better readability. So if I click on it, I'm gonna get file instead of the page. So I can right click and do something like save link as, and that's gonna save a logo for me. And this is obviously, this is a logo which was downloaded right now. We can do it other way around. So what I can technically do is I could still provide a link to website, let's say mdbootstrap.com, but I want to use something else here. So I could use, for example, an image. So we have this logo PNG. So we have this image, but this image works now as an anchor. If we click on it, it's gonna get us to the website. So this is also possible. Let me quickly add some styles to make it smaller. So now, it's just smaller and it works as an anchor. We can use also buttons, which are another elements. So the button itself looks like this. It's empty, so we have to give it some value. So click me, and let's add new line here. So this is button, and obviously we can surround it with anchor and put this one inside here, and let's get us to MD Bootstrap, and this will work as an anchor as well. Okay, I mentioned before that we're gonna talk about the attributes. So now let's move quickly to the attributes, as we covered most of the inline elements. Obviously there are more, but I think that this is sufficient for you. These are the most common one, and these are the one which you're gonna use most often. And if you need something else, obviously you can read documentation to get more. Now I also mentioned to you that each element that you've seen it obviously while following this video can have some attributes. So we have some core attributes, and these core attributes are attributes like an ID. So this is some unique name. We can have classes, and these are related to the CSS, and we're gonna learn more about it in the CSS video. We can also add some custom styles, which you've already seen as well, like background color black. And basically the specification defines more core attributes like access key, content editable, context menu, spell check, and more. But then again, you're not gonna use them quite often. What you're gonna use often is ID. This is usually how you apply styles, either by ID or a class, or how you get to the different elements using JavaScript. So if you would like to programmatically change this element, then you would have to use either ID or class as one of the easiest way to get to the element and change it, adjust it with JavaScript. Okay, we covered inline elements, so let's move to the next and the last for this tutorial part, which is about forms. So forms are very crucial and a very important part of every web page. So this is something which allows us to communicate with users. So this, as you can see, we always so far we've been just displaying something to user, and now if we want to get some feedback, if we want to get some data from users, we have to create form so that users could also interact with our website. So the easiest and the smallest form would be something like this. Okay, now and as you can see, we have this small input over here, which allows us to put some data into it. Obviously, this is very small, tiny form. It doesn't even have any button to submit our data, but technically this is a working form. And as I said, we have different inputs available. So let's have a look at different inputs now. So yeah, I mean, the first one are called actually inputs, and we can have something like this. So I'm going to create a new form. You can see already that it automatically creates this action. So this defines what's going to happen with this form when we submit it. I'm going to leave it for now. We're going to get back to this one, and I'm going to create a new input, and this has type of text. So as you can expect, it's meant to store some text, right? So this could be, for example, our name. And now, in order to describe our input, we usually use something called label. And if we do it like this, let's say it's user name. So now user knows that we want him to provide username over here. What this label also does is that when we click on it like this, it focuses this field, so we can start typing, right? If I click here and try to type, nothing happens. Or it's typing here, and now if I click on it, it focuses over here. We can have different type of inputs. We can have numeric inputs, but what is important that we can also have dedicated for example, a password. So if we use password, then when we start typing something, we're not gonna see it. Obviously, for the security reasons, we shouldn't make it visible. If someone is next to us and typing, and we are typing our password, we don't want this person to see our password. And HTML5 brings a lot of different inputs. We're not gonna go through all of them. I just want you to quickly show all of them. So as you can see, we can have a color picker. We can have predefined for a date, and as you can see, our browser is automatically showing us the small calendar in different ways. We can have something for email. So this will provide a small validation. So if someone tried to put something here which is not an email, a browser, we're gonna raise an error. We have one for attaching files, so it automatically opens a window to upload, to choose the file. We have all range of different inputs for the numbers, for example, like this one. Password range, so we can do something like 100% to 0. Then we have some buttons here. We're gonna talk about them a little bit later. Some search, date, hours, and few more. I want to focus on few examples out of all the possibilities. So let's move to radio buttons now, because they are also used very, very often. And let me quickly create and show you an example. So we have a form, and inside that form we want to have input, which is type radio. And now let's say we want to have name, gender, ID, male, label for male, and the same for female. Let me add some lines here. So as you can see, we can have this radio button, and as soon as I click the other option, the other one get unchecked. Now there are a few things here to mention. One is that they are sharing the same name, so it's gender. So that's how you know that if we add third option here, let's just duplicate it for a second, doesn't make sense, but the point here is that only one can be selected at the moment. And also what you can see here, there is a small difference. Right here our input was inside our label, so that's how browser knew that this label is for this input. But now, even though they are next to each other, this label this input isn't inside this label. Still, when I click on the label and not the radio itself, it chooses the correct version, and this is because we use this attribute for, and this has this attribute ID. So this is another use case for use of attributes. Let's move to the next one, which are checkboxes. Also very commonly used. Let me quickly just copy paste something which I prepared before, because the syntax is pretty much the same. We just use checkbox here instead of radio. We also have share the same name. We have also different IDs, but the idea is that we can check all or none of them. So this is the main difference between radio. Here you can just check one, here you can check multiple. Next very common one is text area. So as the name suggests, you can have something which allows you to type more content. Typing a lot of content into this input it can be frustrating for user. So let's say we want to have address here. So we have address, and then we have text area. We can define size of it. You can also do that with CSS, obviously, an ID. And this gonna create this nice area, which by the way can be resized, so we can make it bigger, and we can type a lot of text here, also including white spaces new lines, and so on and so on. Okay, next one, select box. So this is another way to present some data. We're gonna do it like this: form, now label for city, and now we're gonna create select, select name city, ID city, and then we have options. So option value Sydney, let me duplicate this one, Melbourne, Cromwell, and that's how we have our select. So this allows us to choose one of the predefined version. Usually we use it when there is more options and we don't want to have obviously like 3 or 4 or 5 radio buttons for this one. We can also make it multi-select. One thing we have to do is simply add this option, this attribute multiple, and this allows us to choose multiple option. I'm just keeping Control pressed, and I can choose multiple options. So let me make a copy of this one, and we want to have this, let's call it multiple city, and this one's going to be without multiple city. So yeah, this is multiple and this is single. Okay, and finally I want to move to submit and reset buttons. So I said we're gonna get back to this one where we were discussing different type of inputs here. So these are very important buttons because as I mentioned before, forms are used to submit some data. So now I'm filling action. So this is basically what we want, what kind of action is going to happen when we submit our form. In this case, we're going to call action.php. We're going to learn how to create working forms in the next video when we're going to learn PHP. So we're going to have also PHP in one video series. And then I'm going to teach you how to work with forms. For now, we're just going to focus on the HTML part. So let me quickly type and create this small form. So we're gonna have label for, let's say, first name, and then we're gonna have input text name, first name, ID first name, and then we're gonna have input type submit, value submit, and same for reset. And as you can see, the value, and now this type defines the button type. This is the submit. Value defines what is written here is submit. If we change this value to something like this, back to default, it's gonna show. And obviously, let's say I'm gonna type something here. If I'm gonna press reset, it's gonna reset this. If I'm gonna press submit, it's gonna go to try to open this action PHP page, and as you can see, it's passing these arguments here. So you can see this correlation here, that we are giving this name, and then it gets a value. Okay guys, I think that's mostly it. So we covered the most important and crucial parts for HTML. I strongly encourage you to check the next tutorial of how to use this knowledge, this HTML knowledge, to build a page. You're gonna find a link to this video in description down below, or you can find this on our channel, where we're gonna teach you how to build different pages like this landing page, portfolio page, but also building a very first website, which is over here. So this is tutorial where we are building very first web page. So we are using this knowledge to build this website, mostly using just HTML and CSS. So after this video, I think you can give it a try. If you want to understand CSS, then watch CSS tutorial first, and then I'm pretty sure you will be ready to start building different pages with our tutorials. If you stayed with me so long, let me know in the comments how did you like it, whether it was clear or not. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to post them, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel, as we are releasing more videos like this every week. So thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video.